Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
There you go.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. This week's show, we're going to do a top 10 or so of 2020 matches in no particular order. This is the big end of the year show that we do every year. This year has been like no other for a number of reasons. We're also going to do a really quick preview of Submission Underground 20 that's happening on the 30th, so the day after the show comes out. As always in the show, I'm your host, Maine, joined with my co-host,
Zach.
It's been a hell of a year, Zach.
It's been a weird one.
As far as news goes, I'm pulled up because I spent the last hour and a half getting our list and checking it twice, trying to make sure if things if things belong on this list or not. Yeah. That was a weird sentence.
It started out really strong.
Two pieces of news. Buchecha is going to make his MMA debut against a very strong Sengali wrestler.
Did you see the video?
They picked a very strange video of him and very strange photo to show of him.
Oh no, the video. There's a video floating around of his one fight because the Sengali
where
wrestler
he almost gets Kimura and lifts the guy
just
up,
picks him up like a curl, like a nice casual curl. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's going to happen. There's a lot of people forecasting Buchecha to take that one relatively handily, given his groundwork.
Yeah.
Keenan Duarte has also announced that in the next 2 years, he's going to make his MMA debut.
Yep.
Looking forward to both of those. Luckily, Christmas, it has been a very quiet week. So that's all I got for news, Zach.
Yeah.
Let's move into this show. So, as always on the Grappling Rewind, every year we do a top 10 of the year, no particular order. So these are going to be 10 matches that we thought were some of the best matches of the year. Now, these aren't just like best match of year. A lot of these have reasons that we're going to go through for why we think they're on the list. Like either the context of the match, the context of the grapplers, just various reasons that we'll go through. This is our list of 2020.
And that's been this year, right? Like I think this year, for a lot of these matches have been a little bit more based on context. We've had a lot of weird things going on. There haven't been as many matches, and so we don't...
There's been a lot of super fights this year, but as far as like we don't have nearly as many matches on the...
from the majors, we really had Pans and Euros to
Pans
choose
even
from.
Was this weird Pans and Euros. We have, I think, 1 or 2 matches from Euros.
Yeah, Euros.
That were like the only other major that we had was a full-fledged major.
Yep.
So, like everything in 2020, this list is not going to look like last year's list, but we think we have some great matches. We
Definitely matches worth watching. There's plenty of matches worth watching this year.
Everything on the list is worth watching for the reasons that we're going to go through. We also have some matches of the year. They were a bit one-sided. We have some prospect matches of the year. We have some honorable mentions, and we have a couple of guys that we're going to debate on of who had the best 2020. They're pretty clear for all of us. And then end of the show, Zach and I are going to do highlight of the year and low light of the year for us. I think you can probably guess what the low light of the year is. But basically, BJ and grappling related highlight and lowlights of the year for us, as we do every year. I absolutely love the end of the year show, and I'm ready to put 2020 to bed on this one. Zach, where do you want to start for matches of the year in no particular order?
I'm going to start with the one that I pushed real hard for to be on this list. Mikey Musmechi versus Muhammad Ali.
If you haven't seen this match, go back and watch it. This was Mikey basically announcing that he was going to do Euros and that he was going to go into the ultra heavy or absolute?
No. You're confusing. This was that was for Pans. And so what he did this year was he went in and he did his own weight bracket, and then
he did absolute.
He did absolute.
That's what it was.
And this was in the absolute. And so Mikey won his match against Seif, who is...
I forget Seif's last name, but Seif is about 450?
Magnanimous man. Huge guy, 450? Right? And that could have been on here because it's a really exciting idea where we have this super, super small guy in Mikey, this lightweight.
It's literally a David versus Goliath match.
Yeah.
But if you go back and watch the match...
It's really not that exciting.
There's a lot of Mikey getting crushed on. Yeah. And then being able to take it via penalty.
Yeah, he won by a penalty point, which I'll give it to him. I mean, he didn't get beat.
Dude.
But weighing like 1/4 of his opponents.
And he collapsed after the match because he had to deal with that guard. And
it's an impressive
It is an impressive feat. Definitely not a top 10 of the year, though.
Not a top 10. Not the most exciting. I actually pushed for the Musmechi Ali match, though, because I think that this was actually a good match. And it's crazy. Like, we still have this David versus Goliath kind of situation going on.
Yeah, Ali is all of what? 260 something?
Right, he's an ultra heavyweight.
Mikey made light feather.
He made light feather.
Which was 130-ish something.
Yeah, close to half. We'll call it close to half.
Pretty much.
His size, right?
I think Ali outweighed him by 100+ pounds.
Yeah, sure. Yes. That makes a lot of sense. And Mikey plays this really nice spider guard for most of the game, and it's kind of back and forth. Musmechi scores some legitimate points. Like, there are real, honest, I scored points.
And everyone goes,
points on that, in that match.
Shit.
Yeah, and he was
gonna
up at
beat
certain
former
points.
world champion Muhammad Ali in the fucking gi at a major.
Crazy fucking competitive.
And then Ali goes,
no,
they're not. I'm not going to let you do this to me.
And like, I don't know. I think when we talked about it, when it happened, Mikey like lost the opportunity to play the spider guard for a little bit, and then Ali, does
what
Ali
does,
things, right?
Yes.
And Mikey ends up losing the match, but it was incredible that it was so competitive, and the technique that Musmechi was using was unbelievable. Ali was also impressive in the match. Like, he won the match, right? And it was an impressive feat for him to beat Mikey, considering how well Mikey was doing technically. And I think it was a beautiful match. It was a wonderful thing. It led to Musmechi doing heavyweight.
He did some division he probably shouldn't have done, and at Pans, and I think he ran into Maidana in the first match on Maidana, and Maidana went, "Yeah, I'm not going to be nice to you like Ali was or Sif was. I'm going to impose my weight on you," and then very quickly, I think, tap Mikey with an arm in Ezekiel.
It wasn't super quick, but it was quick. It was quick.
It was decisive.
Yeah, it was a decisive win.
But this was also in the context. So that match, go back and watch that match. That's one of the matches of the year. This match, this year was also interesting for Musmechi because this is the year that he left Kai Terras.
Yep.
And that there was all of this rumor he was potentially going to fight Herber Santos or Keenan Duarte. They were going to put up 10 grand to see that match happen. And basically, Mike was, look, I'm going to fight everyone. Bring it on. And I thought it was interesting, and I think we saw in the Maidana, I think it was Maidana.
Yeah, I think it was Maidana.
We saw in that match, okay, that's probably how that's going to play out. But still, I do appreciate that the Roosterweight champion and then really the light feather champion was willing to do that and kind of put his money where his mouth is, because before he went up into the weight classes, he did not have a single unavenged loss at his black belt career. Yeah, which is crazy. So it was cool to see that in Mikey. It was cool to see him, talk mad shit as much as he and Kyle could, and like promote these matches. There was a talk about him versus Keenan. If he had gotten through Ollie at Euros, he would have fought Keenan. Yeah. But we ended up seeing Ollie versus Keenan, which is also on our match of the year. Did you see how that segue? That was like the best segue I have ever done on the Grappling Rewind.
So I guess we're going to Ollie Keenan next.
Ollie, have anything else to talk about for Mikey?
Maybe we should do another different match.
What match do you want to do? Just ruin it. All right, so Ollie versus Keenan. So this is the match where we just saw Ollie have a very, very close match with Mikey Musmechi, and then he runs into the gi wizard, Keenan Cornelius. This is Keenan's first Europeans, I think, in like 5 years or something like that. It will be the first major that he had done, I think, separated from Matheus when he had his own gym,
for sure.
Legion.
And he had taken some time off of competing while he was opening Legion. And it was
a significant amount of time.
Yeah, a significant amount of time. And I mean, that's a lot of work to do.
And he talked about like not training as well. Like not even taking up, just like not like doing only business stuff in that time period. And the top guys in the world don't do that. And then he's like, look, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Europe for the first time in 5 years. And I was like, oh shit, Keenan Cornelius in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it was a good match based on all of that. The match itself was... Keenan kind of put on a clinic.
Dude, there is a sequence in this match where Keenan wrestles up from the bottom, and he has Ollie in a single leg.
He's got a lapel guard single kind of situation.
Yeah, and Ollie's kind of trying to run out, but kind of trying to counter too. And Keenan's pushing Ollie to the edge of the mat, and Ollie does that wrestler thing where he does the front like head kick flip, and Keenan keeps the esteem lock, keeps pulling it up, pulls Ollie back into bounds, turns the corner, and then Ollie is able to basically turn the angle and pull out completely. And it was like, what the fuck sequence did I just see? Oh, I saw two guys that genuinely want to win, that are playing the rules a little bit, but are both keeping it in bounds. Also, I appreciated the ref let him go to the yellow on all of those takedowns and keep working. And it was just like, okay, this is what I want to see out of like a black belt heavyweight gi match.
And that was also, there was a very decisive sequence for Keenan on there. Once it did get back down to the mat, I think it was after that exchange, got back down to the mat, and Keenan had, I think... I could be misremembering this. It's been a little while since I really closely watched it. But I think Keenan started on the bottom, hit a sweep with the lapel guard, kept that lapel guard on top, passed with it, then transitioned to knee ride again with the lapel, and he racked up a boatload of points in the process. So he had the sweep points, he had the pass points, he had the knee ride points, and I think by the end of the match, it was 10-2.
on how to use the lapel.
Yeah, it was really
the gripping sequences. And again, Ollie is no joke, of similar size and strength to Keenan. It was
unbelievable competitor. Ollie is,
former world champion.
Yeah,
like former world champion in the gi. So it was a great technical match, and I absolutely loved it. It was probably one of my favorite gi matches of the year. Again, I tend to lean more no-gi just because personally, like I understand it a little better, and I'm better at it. But I do appreciate when you have a masterful gi performance in a level in the league that I cannot even comprehend, such as like taking down the monster that is Ollie with the magic of lapels, like Cornelius can do. So
it was great.
Yeah, great match at Euros. We have another Euros match on here.
Yeah, we have.
All right, let's move. So moving in after Keenan defeats Ollie,
we're basically just doing the absolute.
Not nearly
Euros.
as good of a segue. I think was this weight or absolute?
This was weight. I think.
Weight.
Yeah, this.
We have
weight.
Keenan Cornelius versus Felipe Andrew. So this match is also on our top 10 matches of the year, mainly for the context of I think what this did. Or sorry, for some context. Keenan's first black belt loss by submission in the gi. Crazy. The technique involved for what Felipe Andrew did to get there in the way that he's able to just lock up and basically not bait Keenan, but the speed in which he is able to throw the triangle on Keenan Cornelius that he ends up kind of finishing a triangle armbar for. And the fact that this was the breakout performance for what basically made everyone go, oh, I want Felipe Andrew on every single super fight card I can. Because he goes for the finish, he's dangerous everywhere, and he's a dangerous submission hunter, so he's exciting. I think this was the match that made us go from covering Felipe Andrew in the majors and occasionally to there was a point where he was on every single card. So I think that much of a catapult kind of explains why this match is so important. It's a very technically interesting match, but this is one of those context makes the key for why this is such an important match.
And this is something that we've seen from Felipe Andrew since then too. Not this exact setup, although I think we have seen this pretty much.
We saw a very similar setup versus him on Hulk on Who's Number One.
But something that
Third Coast.
Yeah, but something that he does really well is that when you're in an open guard situation, whether he's on the top or the bottom, in this case he was on the bottom, he's very good at managing and dominating the grips well. And that was something that was technically really nice about this particular match was that he was able to manage Keenan's grips while Keenan was doing some passing that he does pretty often, this sort of wide open movement type passing, and he was able to manage the grips well enough that it led to Keenan stumbling, and he gets this triangle, and then he did that in multiple matches from that point forward. This grip domination in the open guard,
pony thing that he got.
But this was the first time that I really noticed it, and then from that point forward, Felipe Andrew is just all about grip domination and open guard, and then he uses that to set up his beautiful straight ankle locks, which we've seen a lot from him in the past year as well.
The straight ankle locks, the toe holds, and I don't know. This was the match personally for me that made me take a much closer look at Felipe Andrew, his game, his accolades, and kind of go, oh yeah, we need to talk about him more on the show than we do because he is an extremely noteworthy grappler. And so, I think part of why we just lost the computer. Part of why some of these things are on the list is because reasons is the context behind the match was really good, the technique behind the match, the finishing Keenan by submission, which no one had ever done at black belt, crazy. And you now appreciate this, Lachlan Giles in 2019, the three giants that he slayed, in itself, not that complex of a match, but very, very interesting technically for what was happening, and then propelling Lachlan Giles in the stage that it was, makes it important. Very similar match for that. So, do we have anything else that's Euros?
Nothing else Euros, but I think we can follow up with our second Felipe Andrew match on here.
Okay.
Gaudio?
Getsu Gaudio.
Yeah.
This one's a bitch to find.
Yeah.
A little bit. So this is a Substars match.
Yeah.
And if you remember Substars, also of 2020, had a very crazy stacked card, bunch of good, really great matches. Had a 36-minute match between Cyborg and Lovato that went to 6 or 7 different overtimes.
Interesting match on its own.
Yep. It had Gordon Ryan versus Tex Johnson, which is on another list later in the show. But these two, this match is on there for a bunch of reasons. Patrick Gaudio versus Felipe Andrew. These guys have a really, really interesting rivalry spanning back many, many years. They've competed against each other a ton. This match in particular was a little hard to find, but I thought it was very interesting for 2 reasons. One, Substars had heel hooks in the gi.
And in this match in particular, it's really exciting because there's a lot of a very technical leg entanglement play in the gi, which we don't get to see very often. I will openly admit that I'm strongly for heel hooks in the gi.
Josh has a win via heel hook in the gi at brown belt.
Awesome.
Like in a super fight.
I believe that heel hooks in the gi, especially at
I like them.
I
train them.
Are fine. And I would love to see them more because they make a lot of these 50-50 exchanges and leg entanglement exchanges more interesting and more technical, and that's what it did here. And so there's this really, really awesome series of 50-50, which is not something you hear me say very often.
Yeah, you're like an open 50-50. I think hater is the right word.
Yeah,
not hater.
Yeah,
you just don't
right.
particularly like a good 50-50 match.
I don't like the seesaw butt stuff. Like it's just kind of it's not technically exciting to me. So I don't. But when you mix heel hooks in, now there's some threats. You can't play that game as clean and as safe, and it becomes not a like I'm gonna sit here and try to wedge out some points position, and it becomes I have to fear for my life position.
Yeah,
and so one thing does that.
In the context of this match, the match prior, we had seen Maggie Grandati versus
I don't remember.
I just pulled it up. Well, Maggie got heel hooked in the gi, and everyone went, "Oh, they have heel hooks in the gi." Yeah. I forgot about that. Or on the broadcast, like, "Oh, I didn't know about that." Yeah. And so a funny thing happens. It happens a lot in MMA. You will see something earlier in a card where someone will hit a weird submission, and it'll be like very, very famously the Suleybaev stretch. Aljamain Sterling hits it in an earlier match, and then Magomed Sharipov hits it. It's a beat. Magomed Sharipov hits it, I think, 3 or 4 matches later, and it's a submission that had never been hit in the UFC before. I think maybe one time ever, first time, and it's hit twice in the same night because the guy goes, "Oh, I can do that.
I remember
want to do it."
Yeah.
And so when you have heel hooks in the gi, it usually takes one match for someone to go, "Oh, I can do this," and then the subsequent matches, you will see it featured much more prominently as a technique, and that was on display here because this sequence starts out basically with Gaudio entering into a heel hook in the gi.
Yep. And then there's some really nice entanglement play that we were talking about, and then Gaudio at some point goes for the 50-50 armbar, which is
ballsy.
Ballsy.
It's one of my favorite techniques because it. Guys, I feel Matthias, who's really good at it.
Yeah.
There's a couple of guys that are very, very good at it, and it's a funny technique in general, but it's very, very strong. And I love that it's a way out of the 50-50 to make people fear for the upper body and the lower body. But the way that Felipe Andrew counters it is pretty baller here.
Yeah, he inverts a little bit and goes for the straight ankle lock, which we've seen from him multiple times.
Which is dangerous. He does it from that low grip that he uses where he puts his foot in the top side or the underside of not the knee, but almost under your thigh and quad, and he pushes away really aggressively and starts to turn, and Gaudio goes, "Oh, I don't want to do this," and they start fighting the legs and opening the legs, and you get this nice entanglement. Where both guys are actively attacking and defending, and you see Felipe Andrew, and one of the things we love about him is he's tenacious when he gets your leg. Like, he gets onto it, and he's willing to just invert and keep it and just continue to have that grip and roll through all of the series of positions and inside and outside on the ankle lock. As he's going for it.
And what's amazing about Felipe Andrews' straight ankle locks in particular, I like a lot, is that he will switch his foot grips pretty regularly. Like, he'll flip,
he's a really dynamic pummeler with the feet.
Yes, yeah, but he'll maintain the grip on the ankle until he starts wedging that into the right place, gets it in a spot where he likes. But he'll keep control on the hips really nicely by moving back and forth as he rolls up and down and back and forth, and that's on display for this finish, and he does end up finishing the straight ankle lock.
Also 2 different color gis, which I like a ton, so you can see a lot more of the work happening between the legs and the hand grips. It's just helpful. Definitely. I think it's a short. I think it's less than a 3-minute match.
Yeah, it's less than 3 minutes. Yeah,
very short match.
Difficult to find, but
you can
if
find
you can
it
find
on Ricardo Amendola's YouTube page. He has
Yes.
a copy of the match up there because it's hard to find because no one got paid and the company went out. And so even on Box TV, which is where the match was streamed, where I bought the pay-per-view, I can't get it anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, I'm like, oh, I actually would like to go back and watch some of these matches. But that's where you can find this match. Shout out to Amendola. That dude has more old school dope matches and posts them every week. So also that was cool 2020. I think he got did way more of that this year than prior years.
Yeah,
so you can
there
find
was something in that downtime when nothing was happening, he was posting some old stuff pretty regularly.
And still does to this day.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of ADC stuff there.
Yeah.
There's old
I specifically remember it was so good when there was no no new jiu-jitsu to watch, though, because you could go back
Ricardo,
and...
which you got from me this week, and you always have, like, great matches. And so, yeah, that was also, like, a highlight. We got to watch a bunch of old matches that we hadn't got a chance to look at in a couple of years, because usually we're pretty inundated the past few years with current matches and current stuff happening. So this year we had a bunch of shows that we did that were basically recapping historic matches or historic rivalries. Or it was fun. It wasn't fun to edit because it was remote, and remote editing takes about 4 hours or 5 hours longer for me. Than
not me.
everything else. But they were a really cool collection of shows, and I think we used a bunch of his footage to reference in talking about some of those matches. So
that made it easier to find the matches that we were looking for.
Yeah, way easier.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go from here? We can continue on the Keenan train, or we can go and take a jump over. I think, honestly, we should maybe continue on the Keenan train. Kind of get the first half of the year done.
Yeah.
Other match on the top 10 matches of the year was Roberto Jimenez versus Keenan Cornelius on the inaugural Who's Number One. This match was, again, this is a great match. But also a great match for the context of it. This is directly after Keenan got subbed by Felipe Andrew.
Yeah.
This is a gi match at Who's Number One. This is Roberto Jimenez's first black belt match. First match as a black belt.
Yep.
And it's on this big stage, the main event of this Flow Grappling inaugural Who's Number One giant ranking event. Yep. Keenan Cornelius, I think, is the number one or very highly ranked. Roberto Jimenez is coming in basically as an unranked black belt, blue chip, brown belt prospect, double gold, and all of these majors and all these accolades. We'd covered him for a while, just talking about how dynamic he was, what his game looked like, but it was in the gi.
Yeah.
And Roberto Jimenez comes out looking to make a statement, and he outpoints Keenan by a very narrow margin.
Yeah. And it was a very back and forth match. I think the final score was 6-4 for Jimenez, something along those lines.
Very, very close.
Which, I mean, for a match at this caliber, that's relatively high scoring. So there's a lot of back and forth, and it finishes very exciting, where Keenan is sort of jumps to Roberto's back, and if he had another 30, 45 seconds, who knows? He might have been able to secure the hooks. Like, there was a chance that he could pull off the win, but it was not enough time, and he ends up losing in, these last seconds. He doesn't lose in the last seconds, but he can't come back.
Yeah, he can't pull the points back with the ads or any of that in the last few seconds. And so you get to watch this guy, Roberto Jimenez, who we've been covering. Basically, always a question happens. This kind of leads to something later in the show, of when a guy goes from the colored belts into black belt. What's that transition look like? Certain guys kind of stumble, but more recently than not, we have
historically there's a delay.
Yeah,
but
and we're
lately
seeing
that's not
less
happening
and less
as much.
of that. I think this was also the year kind of. So,
do
you have anything more to talk about in this match?
No, I mean, it was a breakout match for Jimenez. We saw a lot more of him throughout the rest of the year. Some ups and downs for him throughout the rest of the year, but he was always a strong pick in any of his matches from that point forward.
He
and this
won
was
10 grand at at Third Coast Grappling. He won one of those tournaments. One of the Kumites. A standout for sure, and this was the first match at black belt, showcasing he can compete at black in the gi with the best in the world. Leading into this we'll talk more of the matches here in a minute. I want to talk about this. I think is the first year that I don't want to say it like this, but belts didn't matter. We saw in 2020 mattered less.
Yeah, more
people have inner belt matches than ever before,
and I think
especially in no-gi.
I think that's partially. Well, I think that's a couple things. One, in no-gi, it is more no-gi that we're seeing that than in the gi.
Yeah,
and that's kind of always been the case in no-gi, right? You always have even the biggest tournament in no-gi world, right, is ADCC, and historically you have guys that aren't belted going in and competing in ADCC. I mean, they're MMA fighters there, and in the very early years they were shoot fighters or some catch guys that were strong competitors.
There's a sumo guy. There's a whole host of ADCC storied history about guys that are grapplers going into a submission wrestling tournament.
Yeah, but and the rules are structured in a way that works for ADCC, but it's always mattered a little bit less in no-gi.
Right. And I think this was the first year, though, that I think when we started the grappling grind in 2017, there were a lot of matches where you'd see a black belt fight a purple belt in an EBI event.
Oh,
and
yeah.
other than that, it was relatively rare to see like it was a thing of note.
Yeah.
Whenever it came up, it was always mentioned in commentary. It was always mentioned like in the lead up. It was a big deal. And nowadays, that is commonplace and relatively normal.
Yeah.
Like Subversive openly like has these are the belts, and like it's not uncommon to have a black belt fight a purple belt in a gi, or especially in no gi, and it's not uncommon to have that purple belt come out on top.
Yeah.
It's still definitely, an exception to the rule, but when it happens, it's like it is not as much of the earth-shattering event that it was. And I think 2020 is the first year that has become way more commonplace than in prior years we've ever done any sort of professional coverage.
Yeah, yeah. And we've talked about this a little bit too. I think a big part of that is the birth of jiu-jitsu as we know it, right? And when that occurred, and the relationship between when that occurs, when kids start doing jiu-jitsu for fun, and when you see those kids become adults that are still doing jiu-jitsu, right?
We had more prospect folks. They were like kids and juveniles come into and get black belt this year.
Yeah.
Nikki Ryan, Grace Gundrum, Jessica Khan, the first person through the AOJ kids program from a kid all the way to the adult black belt level. Had a really great match this year. Didn't make the list, but on UAEJJF AJP with Maisa Bastos versus Jessica Khan, where Jessica Khan at the beginning of the match was winning that match.
Against Maisa Bastos, who's dominant fighter.
And so like it was a really great year. When this later in the year later in the show we have a couple more matches, like prospect matches that you should go back and watch, but we had more prospects that are going to black belt this year than I can ever remember before. Like there were people of note prior years that would get black belts, big deal. He's been a good brown belt, but this year you see them more in the mix with the black belts, and I think
and this leads actually into another one of the matches on our top 10 here.
All right, let's go to that match then.
Cisneros versus Panams, right?
So Josh Cisneros. So yeah, that's. I think we were gonna pick a specific match, but I think the run here is more.
Yeah.
It's our show. We do what we want. Is more exciting than talking about like the match. The finals match I think was on my list initially.
Yeah,
it's a little slower than I thought it was.
But we also got to mention. We also got to mention in this, like, it's hard to talk about Pans and Cisneros without mentioning that during the tournament he beat Mayo.
You are the
meow.
Yeah,
I
love how you're so good at this, but like I give you a list. I give you a list of names. We just be like a rewind extra show. You're just like, here's 40 high-level black belts. 20 of them are world champions. Zac, I want you to read these names off.
Out of 40, I'd get 35 wrong.
Yeah.
Like, well, here's the thing. Here's my excuse. Here's my excuse. One, I'm not good at Brazilian names. That's not really much of an excuse. But two, the real thing is that I watch almost everything on mute.
Right.
I don't listen to the commentary. I very rarely listen to the commentary.
Lifehood of watching jiu-jitsu, you've been like, I've watched about 4 matches not on mute.
Yeah, so I'm reading the names.
Never heard Paulo Miao's name said out loud
until you told me. Right, and so like it's not even that. Like I know what the names are most of the time now, but it's hard to get out of that habit that you read the name over and over again for 10 years, and then you hear someone else tell you the right way. I'm still saying it the wrong way.
And you're also hearing me tell you, or like other folks on the Grappling Rewind tell you, which we literally have a bumper since the inception of the show, which is, hey, if we butchered your name, please let us know so we can not do that. It's been the outro bumper for at least 2.5 years now of just like, hey, I'm sorry I messed your name up. So you're in good company, Zac. So Cisneros run here. This was 2 weeks after Cisneros got black belt.
Yep. 2 weeks later, he beats Miao.
And again, this is a weird tournament, but you still have a guy like Paulo Miao in this tournament. It's a less attended tournament, but Paulo Miao,
still Panams.
World champion Paulo Miao is there, and Josh Cisneros beats him.
Yep.
And then his entire run to take the Panams medal in 2020 as a 2-month black belt is just crazy and stellar.
And his final match versus Clementino is not necessarily like. It's not like he's supposed to win that either.
Dude, the ending sequence of that match. You say what you were going to say here, because I know you got to know
that's
on this
it.
one.
That's it. But
he's losing the match.
Yeah,
Cisneros is losing the match. Okay, he's not going to win it.
It's not the most exciting match the whole time, right? Like it's 2 points.
It's a technical final IBJJF match at a major when it really matters, and guys play more conservatively.
Yeah, and it's about 7 minutes of some interesting but not very exciting guard play necessarily, where Cisneros gets, I think, 2 advantages throughout the guard play, but he's down 2 points, right?
Yep.
And then the last 3 minutes start happening. Cisneros starts going very aggressive, starts working the sweep really hard, and ends up getting the sweep with about 45 seconds left.
So now he's winning. A match he's been losing
2-2 with advantages.
With the first finals major at black belt. And then what you're supposed to do here is stall and stall hard.
Yes.
And Cisneros didn't get the memo and keeps fucking trucking.
He's going for submission.
And trying to submit like Santiago in the finals of Pans in a match that you were down for the majority of the match.
And I think he goes for a triangle or armbar and an omoplata, and he's putting himself in a place where he can definitely get past if he
we're scored on and lose the match, and he just 45 seconds into that match
goes for it.
He just goes for it. And I was watching it going,
please don't do this. Please don't. Please,
I was just going like, man, I would never do that, but I love you for it. And that's again, that's his whole run at Pans, and then culminating in that decision making at the end. You know what? I'm going to go for all the marbles and go for it in the finals match, and it just caps off that kind of not fairy tale story, but it caps off that great run.
Yeah.
And it's why it makes it on this list for just mainly for that last 45 seconds of what are you doing?
Please don't. But he wins.
And he wins.
He still finishes. He doesn't get past. He finishes.
It's something that you would never coach people to do. And at the highest levels, you never see it.
Yeah.
You just never see it. A guy's up. He's like, cool, I've got 45 seconds. I can stall any position I want. And Cisneros goes,
hell, and at this level, you see guys that are like, cool, I'm up, 8 minutes left. I can stall that.
Yeah, we saw that in that tournament, by the way. I think 7.5 minutes we saw that. We talked about it on that show a little bit. I don't like stalling, so I remember that vividly.
Yeah. But the run was beautiful. The finish was awesome. The end of that run was great. And again, he got his black belt 2 weeks prior.
Yeah. So we've gone through, we've got a couple more matches. I think this is as great a time as any to segue into another great run of 2020. Yeah. There were a couple great ones of 2020. We have not Grappler of the Year, but run of the year.
Yeah. Who had the best year later.
Another guy that had a great year was Dante Leon in 2020.
Yeah.
That dude put on a collection.
In terms of matches, the level of excitement that were in every single one of the matches, we have a who had the best year segment coming up a little bit later on, and that's more of a consideration of who did he win, how many matches, that kind of thing. The statistical things are what we're going to talk about there.
The Emile Award of most consistent best grappler.
Sure, yeah, that's what we have later. What this is, Dante Leon of 2020 being on this list, is every one of these matches was high level and a fucking banger. Every single one of these matches was exciting. I think there's maybe one where I wouldn't say it was one of the most exciting matches of the year. One out of his, 7?
Something like
matches?
That. I can't do math.
They're just all...
So, kicks off the year versus the rematch with Hanado Canuto on Kasai Pro 7. I was at that live. I was Matt's side. It was crazy. There is a knee bar and heel hook sequence that Leon hits on this that was bonkers, that Emile got 3 shots Matt's side that are crazy good. In frame, Dante in the air, extended on the knee bar, and I was like, oh, Emile is a professional shooter Matt's side. Crazy match. Then immediately goes over the pond to take on Ty Rotolo, fresh off of Ty Rotolo's 80cc, coming out of prospect into oh, you're this crazy kid that's amazing. Beats Rotolo in a very a veteran savvy match.
Decisive match.
Then goes on to fight Johnny Tama on Fight to Win 142. Back and forth banger match.
Super exciting match.
Finishes Tama with a triangle. Then goes on to fight Gary Tonin
in the rematch.
It's a Gary Tonin match. It's a banger. Loses that one. But from an action point.
Oh, it was so exciting. Dante Leon and Gary Tonin are 2 of the most exciting grapplers that you can have, and for very different reasons. They are very stylistically very different.
But they're both very, very similar. They can both wrestle. They can both wrestle up and down.
Sure.
They're both happy to go for the legs, happy to go for the neck, definitely can go for the back.
Yeah, but I think Gary plays a more... I don't know if I want to say savvy. He plays a little bit more of a tricky game where he's going to do what he needs to do. He can do it from anywhere, but he's going to use... sort of sleight of hand, I think, is maybe a nice
really
way to say it.
Yeah.
He's going to use sleight of hand to beat you, whereas Dante Leon is going to use his hand to your face to beat you.
Yeah.
You know, he's not. I mean, he is tricky. I think everyone at that level of jiu-jitsu is tricky, but Dante's gonna. He doesn't care as much that you know what's coming, whereas Gary, I feel, is a little more sly
that's
about it.
That's a really good way to put that. Yeah,
and that's what I meant by their.
Dante's going to look at you and then he's going to pass you.
Yeah.
Gary Tonin is going to go look over there and then pass you. Like, they're both very functional, very very similar ways they're probably going to pass you. But Leon is going to be able. It's just going to look at you and go, "I'm going to do this."
At least that's the way that I see it. Yeah.
And so that was that match. Then he goes on to fight Cody Steele,
who had a great year on his own. Like a breakout year for Cody Steele. Cody Steele looked great this year.
Got black belt this year. Another prospect
looked
that
awesome.
We covered a bunch that we've covered continually more. I think Cody Steele. I think he's on one of the prospect lists here that I have.
He
that's
should.
Basically fought every ADCC trials guy ever this year. And beat a bunch of them.
And he's looked great doing it. This match, he was against Dante Leon, who was not showing any
mercy.
Was not showing mercy in this match. And Dante Leon just puts on an excellent performance.
But Steele weathers the storm for the entirety of the match.
He does.
And it showed again. I like this match because it showed Leon is still kind of part of the new guard, a bit younger. I think he's 24, 25. Yeah. Steele is, I think, 23, 24, like very similar, but Leon has been a black belt longer, has a little more depth of experience, but you saw that Steele can contend, and so I love this. It's like, it's the older prospect,
the medium guard versus the young guard.
And I think you consider Dante a prospect anymore at all.
No, not at all.
Medalist at ADCC.
Yeah, not at all.
But it was just a fun-paced match. And then he has the match on Who's Number 1, 5 versus Roberto Jimenez, and he loses that via decision. But again action-packed match. Jimenez brings it. Leon brings it.
And Jimenez had quite a bit of weight on him for this match, I think so. Too.
Was this the match?
Or at least he looked bigger,
This was the match that Leon was bigger than Jimenez.
Oh, was it?
Yes, because it was... When we previewed it and what everyone thought is that Jimenez was going to coming from like 185 and Jimenez came in at like 170 something and Leon came in at like 184, 183. And everyone was like,
what happened?
What? That's
okay. I knew there was a weight discrepancy. I couldn't remember exactly.
It was a funny weight discrepancy because it was like the reverse of what everyone thought it was going to be.
Right.
So Dante Leon versus 2020 probably had the biggest collection of like great fun matches.
If I was only going to watch one person's matches from 2020, it would be Dante Leon's.
Yeah. Just like if
there's
you want like
so many good ones.
Action.
Yeah.
For that dude gave us a year of action. So Dante Leon 2020 for a year of action. Let's see. What other matches do we have? Another great match this year was Jessica Flowers versus Maria Meliasic.
Yeah.
I tried to pull it up and I'm having a hell of a time pulling it up. They fought a couple of times and I can't. It's on our list. I cannot find the exact match it is. I'm going to try to include it in the show notes after.
Yeah.
About that, it is a great match. Josh was like, you need to include this match. It's a good match. And I remember covering it on the show. I just can't find the match now because it's pandemic. It's 2020. Yeah. Cap it off with 2020. What other matches do we have? I think we have one more match here.
Yep. No, we got two. Barbosa, Batista. From Pans Finals.
That was also Pans.
Yeah.
I love this match, and this is on this list because this is an Atos versus Atos match.
Yeah.
This is a finals match where you have a teammate versus teammate match, and homies go at it. And I loved this mostly because it's so rare. We had other divisions at this tournament where people closed out the divisions.
And that's what's happened all of history in jiu-jitsu. Just people close out matches forever.
I think it's one of the first in recent history Atos versus Atos matches. And I love this because you see that both guys train with each other a lot.
Yeah.
And you saw this weird rabbit hole meta of counters to things that hadn't happened yet, that were happening, that were in the process of being countered. And I was like, oh, we are watching two guys that train with each other in the same division day in and day out. And it's such a more dynamic match, and it was amazing from a technical perspective.
It was beautiful to watch. And there's even a point in this match, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, where I think Barbosa was going to go for a pass, but he's about to put himself in a position where Batista would actually get DQ'd if he did it. And Batista lets go, right? Or it might be the other way around. But
there was some weird rules, and then whoever's commentary did a great job of explaining exactly what had happened. And I went, "Oh, I would have no idea about that." And that was great.
It was this match, but it was also cool because you could see that they've been in that situation so many times that I think it was Barbosa let it go and essentially more or less got past or put himself in a position to get past because it was happening, but he knew he was going to get disqualified if what was going to happen next actually happened.
Yeah.
And so it was clearly a situation they've been in a bunch of times, clearly a situation that
was just
everyone knew what was going on, and then there was like, all right, yeah, okay, I got it.
It was such a cool match. Again, I like it reminded me a lot of like one with Rachel, because in the pandemic, that's all I've trained with for a year. And so it's just us rolling. And you have good training partners. You get used to like, okay, I've trained with this person for 4 years now. They've watched me develop my A game, and I've watched them develop their counters to my A game. And so when you roll...
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a person on this planet that can defend my side control attacks better than Spencer right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you've trained in my basement for the majority of the year now with him.
Yes, one person for close to 60 hours, so... Yeah.
And so it's cool to see that at the high level of like, oh, you have all of the answers and the counters before they're even throwing the thing that they're going to throw, that you're going to counter, that they're going to counter, that you're going to counter, and you get to watch it play out at the level and in a finals match like that. It was a rare treat. Definitely deserves to be on this list. Is that the final? Is that
Gordon Diniz?
This is
this is it. Well, it's not.
Gordon Ryan gets one match this year. He honestly didn't have a ton of matches this year because a lot of guys don't want to fight him. Or
I don't know why.
Or honestly, I think there's not a lot of fights that people can make for him that are of any interest. Like I think everyone wants to fight him, but there are very few matches that are of any interest for people to like watch him fight.
And it's got to be hard for promoters too, because he's got a price tag associated with him. You have to pay him enough money to do it, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, is the match that I'm going to be able to set up with him gonna make me money still after I pay him to do it?
Right.
And I think that's a big question.
Yeah, he's in honestly a weird spot where it seems like he's actually struggling to get matches because he has a price tag that can garner that. He's going to sell the match. He's going to promote the match. He's going to probably win the match. If there's a pay on the line for winning, he's probably going to get that as well. I think most of his contracts are probably flat, no paid, no bonus for win or sub.
Sure,
but like there's a couple of like 3 or 4 matches. There's 5 matches that we want to see Gordon Ryan in. Now there's 4 because we saw Gordon Ryan versus Matheus Diniz.
Yeah.
The context of this match for me is really what makes it was a good match technically. It is current ADCC champion at plus 88 or sorry, under 88, current ADCC champion at under 99 against each other in a no time limit super fight.
Yeah.
It's
great.
Crazy. Like that is a matchup that I don't recall having ever seen made before.
No, I don't think it has. Not in this way, at least, not in like a super fight type of situation. And it was great to see. There was a clear size advantage. It would have been cool if, Gordon Ryan is this figure in jiu-jitsu right now, and he's extremely good.
One way to put it.
He's probably, I think most people would say that he is the best nogi jiu-jitsu player that we have right now.
Definitely the best and active. Like you can make an argument about like Pena and Galvao. Those are the 2 other guys that everyone's asking about. But Gordon Ryan, for just activity against the other top guys, like he's the best, and he's obviously the most polarizing.
But so like regardless of what your opinion on that is he's if he's not the best, he is very close to the best.
Yes.
And Diniz is clearly an exceptional jiu-jitsu player. I would have liked to see the weights like switch. Like if Diniz was the bigger guy and Gordon Ryan was the smaller guy, and Gordon Ryan was the figure that he is and was giving up weight, and then you had this match. That's the only way that this could have been a cooler scenario.
Yeah. But even then, and then to finish Diniz, I think in under 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I mean it was a competitive match. I think Diniz was largely on the defensive.
That's sort of how Diniz plays. For like look at any match.
That's what I was going to say.
Craig Jones match with Matheus Diniz, the other guy right up there at the weight, the silver medalist for ADCC that had the finals match. I think they've had 3 matches at this point, and even Craig Jones just went, I don't want people to have to go through that match again because it's never. He goes because just how they stylistically match up. Like Diniz is going to play much more defensively in nogi because he can he's the best at the weight. Like that's how he wins matches, and that's how you should win matches if you can win that way at the highest levels. And so you saw Gordon have to sort of not be more aggressive, but definitely there's one sequence that I loved in this match where Diniz gets out of a sit-up guard, and then he turns all the way around, and he's going to reset the position because typically when someone does this, both grapplers agree to reset the position. And Gordon Ryan goes,
Nah.
cool, I'm just going to wrestle up here.
Yeah.
Diniz does the spin, and Gordon Ryan double legs him. And I
From
went,
the knees.
oh, that is something we don't see a whole lot.
Double legs him from his knees. Gordon Ryan stays on his knees and just grabs up the legs.
Yeah. But again, it was
Yeah.
what I love about, one of the reasons I love watching Gordon is he will capitalize on the smallest little thing that you did, where you got, not a little, I don't want to use the word lazy, but when you did something that maybe you could have done a different way or a better way, he will capitalize on that.
And I think this is actually like a talking point for jiu-jitsu, period. I think that jiu-jitsu has this sort of like be nice to your training partners attitude, which is good. I think that it builds a sense of community and is nice for that. But I also think it leads to this scenario where you have a lot of like
both guys
checkmates
agree
that
to take a break.
Yeah, like it's instead of like I get a sweep, and a lot of people are not immediately standing up and tackling me back, right? Like
Right.
if there's space, if there's too much space there, you should be getting up. If I break out of your guard by walking away, you should be sitting up and taking me down. Like, I think that there's these moments that happen where there's a pause in the action, and there doesn't need to be. And this was Gordon not letting that pause happen. And it happens a lot in jiu-jitsu. People do this at all levels, everywhere. And it's a thing that you don't see in wrestling. If you see this sort of like kick out in wrestling, if you don't spin around fast enough, I'm going to take you down from the back.
Right.
Like, I'm going to tackle you from the back and get you to the mat immediately. And it's just how everything is. People know it's going to be aggressive. In jiu-jitsu, people are nicer about it, but I don't think that they should be.
Yeah.
And this was exactly that.
It was
Diniz kind of being used to... I mean, he turned
a different
fast,
pace
but
and speed of match, but it wasn't a huge error.
No, it wasn't.
It was a very small thing that is very common in jiu-jitsu, and Gordon just goes, "Nope, nah, not today," and takes it. So it was funny.
I don't play that way.
And then gets on top, and then the ending sequence is beautiful, where Gordon gets mount for 6 minutes.
He was mounted for a while.
And eventually gets to the heel hook and is able to finish a really neat heel hook off of a counter.
There's a little bit of an
hits.
inversion in from there. It was really nice.
Technically, really, really cool finishing sequence of the match, but the dominate 6 minutes. And this is where
the end of this was really actually beautifully sportsmanlike. Gordon kind of gets the heel hook and grabs the control.
And looks at him and goes,
Diniz looks at him.
I have to do this?
And I think that like they both agreed, and then the ref just wanted to see the tap. Like, Diniz looked at him and was like, yeah, okay, you got it. And then Gordon was like, yeah, I got it. And then Diniz kind of like looked at the ref and was like, oh yeah, I guess I have to tap.
I gotta let you know
finish
that I got
this. Yeah.
Yeah. But it
was very gentlemanly.
It was a great display of sportsmanship for a champion versus champion match that are so rare. It was one of, honestly, a couple of matches that I even was really interested in seeing Gordon in this year, so we got to see it. It
was great.
It was a great match. For me, it's definitely like on the top of my year for matches, just for the context of I love seeing when we have a super fight that is actually two champions versus each other, and especially the context of the match. It was no time limit sub only. We're going to see one of the champions get submitted. They are the champions of the highest no-gi organization that exists. Like, this is a super fight that should be made, and it should be made, if you're going to make it in this context, I'm good with it being made in that context. So it was great. Is that all the matches that we have for
I think we got them all.
2020 of the year? All right, let's go to of the year for matches. We have two Gordon Ryan matches that were,
competing for
Gordon Ryan showing why we think he is probably the best in the world in no-gi. His match versus Kyle Bain when Kyle Bain was on mushrooms.
Interesting choice on his end.
An interesting 2020 choice.
10th Planet guys, they're going to do 10th Planet stuff.
It was. And then his match with Tex Johnson at Substars, which was him passing for 20 minutes and eventually finishing an arm
and
triangle
that one was Gordon Ryan avenging a loss from early on in his career.
I think his first black belt loss. I think it was a Grappling Industries back in like 2014 or 15 or might have been even 16. One of those years. And he basically, it was a rematch with Tex Johnson. It showed, and he did this to show off his passing DVD.
Yeah, he did.
Like, he put out a passing DVD like the week before this and was like, I am just going to do this.
And he did do that.
And then he did that. But again, Tex Johnson is Tex Johnson can catch anyone in the world. Like, he caught Felipe Pena in a heel hook in Kasai Pro 7 or Kasai Pro 5 and just ripped. And like,
he's an excellent jiu-jitsu player.
Yes, and Gordon just went, I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah,
and you can't stop me. And it was just like a really impressive display of sort of what the level that Gordon Ryan operates and plays on. That he can take another guy, Tex, that didn't get taken out the first round at ADCC.
Yeah.
They're like made it to the quarterfinals. Like a very, very good, dangerous no-gi grappler. And then Gordon Ryan just went, no, I'm gonna DVD you with this pass. So that was just crazy because like that's the level and that's sort of one of the things I point to when I go, that's how good Gordon Ryan, because no one else can do that to Tex. Like that's not a thing that
nobody else could do that.
Like Tex will invert on you and break your leg in half. Yes. And Gordon was able to keep him there and do that. And so that was one of the year kind of display of why we think Gordon Ryan is like
display of dominance,
the best.
He didn't have a lot of matches, but those ones
he
were
didn't. I wanted to like, kind
dominant.
of include more stuff about him, but I went like, they really didn't have a whole host of matches.
He had one really good match and some dominant performances, but not a ton of matches this year.
It was an interesting year for him coming off again ADCC double gold at weight and absolute.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the next year as things start to open up again.
Very curious. So, you want to go into honorable mention matches, or do you want to go into prospect matches, or going to go to best 2020?
Let's do honorable mentions.
So, honorable mention. Oh, gee, I'm looking at the wrong section of notes. Honorable mention matches. Keenan versus Cyborg at BJJ Bet.
Yeah. So I think this will lead into our next bit real well. So. This is really our only honorable mention. The other one is Mikey and Zac.
Oh, shit, I have Cyborg twice on here.
Yeah,
and we already talked about Mikey versus Zac.
Yeah, we have one honorable mention, but it is worth honorable mentioning. Cyborg beat Keenan with a heel hook at BJJ Bet this year. It was a pretty good match overall. We didn't put it on the top 10, but it was a pretty good match overall. But really, it deserves an honorable mention because Cyborg beat Keenan with a heel hook. Keenan was on a tear. Keenan's been on unbeatable force for the past year and a half. He's been fantastic in every single one of his matches.
ADCC champion at plus 99, having to move up from the division that he should be in, which is under 99, which is what Gordon's in, to I got too many Atos guys in my division. I guess I have to do plus 99. I think he got heel hooked at Keenan the 2 years before that at ADCC when he was still a brown belt, or maybe. I asked Keenan, I'm super embarrassed because when I interviewed Keenan at ADCC, I got how many ADCCs he had been at wrong. Still to this day embarrasses me because I knew it. I just got starstruck talking to him in front and then just like bobbled it. And he was like, no, I've been at this many. And I went,
whoops.
Oh no, I've messed this up. I'm running on about 2 hours of sleep. Oh no, this is going to happen now. But he's been on this crazy run. Cyborg had also been on this crazy run in 2020 that we'll talk about more here in a moment.
But really, I think, and Cyborg wins. But really, I think the big thing here was that up until this point, like it became a joke on the show that when we would predict who was going to win matches, you just never bet against Keenan. Like
you never bet against Keenan, you never bet against Cyborg.
Yeah.
And I learned never bet against Cyborg, and I've never been betting against Cyborg since IBJJF 2019 when he beat okay, Cyborg will probably beat him. And then Cyborg went, bro, I'm Cyborg Abreu.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to win. And then he did. He won Kasai Pro 7 that we were at. And we took out Hulk Barbosa. And then we saw him basically the only other match that we wanted to see him in, because we've seen the Gordon match twice already, was kind of like, okay, how does he fare against the young, like not even prospect anymore, but the guy that's just been on the tear.
Well, also, this was midway through 2020. Yeah, BJJ Bet was about... No, it was kind of later. This was later.
This was in 2020 at some point. Yeah,
this was in 2020.
This was definitely deep quarantine. I think we were like... I think it was just like...
No, I think it was...
July, August,
maybe.
September?
That sounds right.
Maybe October?
It was still nice out.
Man, we live in Maryland. It's always nice out.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, huge win for Cyborg here. I mean, obviously the veteran, it seems weird to call it a huge win for this unbelievable veteran, but the dude turned 40 this week or last week or something like that. Like, the dude was 39 years old and on such a tear.
In Nogi, beat the ADCC plus 99 champion by sub in a regulation match.
Yeah.
Just
great.
What can you say? Honorable mention. This leads, I think, like you said, leads very well into who had the best 2020. Fucking Roberto Cyborg Abreu had the best 2020.
He has my vote by far. We have 4 names on our list of people to argue with each other about. We had Gordon, who we kind of discussed. He had a great year. He had some dominant performances, but he didn't have that many fights, and the fights that he had weren't these like standout. Outside of the Diniz fight,
Gordon needs to have a couple of fights, and those fights just didn't happen this year. And that's kind of the problem with, like, we want to see Gordon versus Galval versus Penna. I wanted to see him versus Diniz. Versus Keenan, or versus...
That's pretty much it for me.
There's one other that I always forget on this list for me that everyone kind of goes, what? But it's meaningful for me.
Okay.
We saw him versus Tex, which is a rematch, which is important. But so Gordon just didn't have the matches that we wanted to see. So it's like, well, he couldn't have the best 2020.
Victor Hugo had an unbelievable year, breakout year, young guy, but he had a couple losses. He had a loss at the end there. He had he had one loss.
One loss to Eric Muniz at BJJ Stars 4. But like he beats Roberto Jimenez, Felipe Andrew, Ronaldo Maidana by choke, Roberto Jimenez by toe hold, Max Jimenez by choke, Felipe Andrew by a steam lock, Jonathan Gracie by Ezekiel choke. He beat Felipe Andrew by triangle choke. He beat Nick Rodriguez by decision. He beat Nicholas Margali by points. Like Victor Hugo had a
awesome year,
astonishing year, and just at the end of 2019, had 2 matches with Cyborg, one of which he lost, and then he avenged in the absolute finals for IBJJF Nogi Worlds via knee bar. Like, Victor Hugo also had an absolutely bonkers and astonishing 2020. We talked about Dante Leon.
We talked about Dante. He had not as many matches, and the people that his matches were against weren't necessarily like world champion, ADCC champion people. They were all extremely good jiu-jitsu fighters, but his matches were more exciting than standout to me. It's in terms of standout, in terms of like historical importance for that. And fewer matches. Keenan's on this list. Keenan had a great year. Couple losses, specifically to this last one to a Cyborg, but had an unbelievable year himself. High-level competition.
Beat Rodolfo Vieira at the end of the year to kind of cap off the year. Like, again, a champion versus champion, like, different era match that was great in its own right. You know, it wasn't, again, on the match of the year's list, but still was an amazing match to have happen. And it was cool. And then we got Cyborg.
Cyborg, who had...
Let me pull up his record here
let's pull up
as
Cyborg.
my computer freaks out. Here is Cyborg's 2020. Back in September, heel hook win over Keenan Duarte. He beats Lucas Barbosa twice, who's number 1 by decision, and in the finals of Kasai Pro 7 by points. He draws with Nick Rodriguez in a rematch from ADCC at Kasai Pro 7 early in that tournament. He has a 36-minute match, I think 8 or something overtimes with Lovato. And if you know the context of those two guys, they go back a very, very long time, have competed against each other a ton. He's able to get that done in golden score. He has a match versus Ferreira versus Tractor. Arnaldo Maidana that he takes by points. Roberto Jimenez he beats in the finals, I think, of Third Coast Grappling for $10,000. He submits Felipe Andrew via like a 10-finger modified guillotine choke to win 10 grand at Third Coast Grappling Invitational, one of the Kumites, and the win over Hulk. Like, he had a crazy 2020. He got engaged. Maggie Grandotti, who is his fiance, got her black belt under him. And like, dude's killing it. Like 2020 for him. Great year Fight Sport, I think, had a ton of breakout stars, had a ton of great guys go there. Wagner Hosho looked good this year. Same with Cyborg. Like, Cyborg Abreu had the Grappler's 2020.
This dude had this year, the year he turned 40. That's crazy. I'm like 32,
age
and
is just a number. Unless you're Cyborg, and then you're still competing and contending and beating.
Amazing.
Undefeated in 2020.
Amazing.
Based on the record that I have from Topology, I think that's correct. But Topology is so much.
I don't
easier
remember
to
him
navigate.
losing in 2020.
I don't remember a lot of things in 2020, and that's
fair.
maybe for better. But yeah, Cyborg had an absolutely crazy year. There were so many, for how dog shit the year was overall, we actually did have a collection of really outstanding matches that did happen and really cool storylines that we were able to walk through. And there's so many other matches and prospects. And like, I would love this show, honestly.
We got one more.
Dude, what?
We got to do prospects.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I was doing like a heartfelt outro here.
Yeah, I felt it coming, and I had to stop.
Even though we don't have like an outro section. We just have highlights and lowlights to talk about. And then we got to preview Sug, which is a weird addendum to this episode because Cheo was like, one more card this year. I was like, all right, Cheo, you got one more. I was going somewhere. I completely lost my train of thought. Prospect matches. So we had a bunch of prospects, and I love talking about prospects. And Zach, you always have kind of a special place in your heart for prospects. You, whenever we have a major event, will always talk about like the purple belts and the brown belts for what you're seeing in the technical displays you're seeing at those levels, because the purple and brown belts are what you're going to see at black belt in 3 to 4 years. You know, typically. And so those techniques are going to be the new wave. And we saw a ton of kind of new wave grapplers come into their own this year and have fantastic matches. And I'm going to talk about a couple of them, starting off with literally a match that happened a couple weeks ago. Andrew Tackett versus Felipe Andrew. Felipe Andrew made the list for matches of the year a couple times this year, but William Tackett also had a crazy year, and this match kind of caps his year off in a great way. Finishes via heel hook on Felipe Andrew.
Can't wait to see what comes out of Tackett.
Dude, brown belt, gonna get black real soon here.
I imagine.
And he was an ADCC alternate in 2019, like just been on a tear, looking better and better, contending. Finally headlines on Who's Number One card. Like, we're going to see a lot more of Tackett, and it's cool to see him cap off the year versus a guy featured so prominently on some of the best matches of 2020.
Yep. Yeah.
We also have his buddy, his boy, his training partner, Cody Steele. And then in my notes here, versus like every trials winner. Cody Steele over the past year has faced Dante Leon, has faced Alec Balding, a trials winner. He's faced John Combs. He's faced who else? Hasn't won all of these matches, but has looked in the mix with everybody in these matches.
Yeah. He hasn't had a match this year where, there's matches that exist where 2 minutes in, you're like, yeah, this isn't gonna. The oof matches of the year, right?
Oof, like Nicky Ryan versus that wrestler, and it was like 20 seconds of like, this is a different sport.
There's less extreme examples of that too, where it's just this is a dominant match, right? Yeah. Like he has not had a match where someone has looked dominant against him all year. Mm-hmm. He's looked in the running, he's been contending, he's been offensive, which is a big thing. Like he's not had a match where he was on his heels the whole time. He's looked great.
We talked about his match
all of
like
these great guys.
About his match with Edwin Najmi, like how good he looked. I love the dynamism.
He won that match too, but against Najmi, who's a veteran, unbelievable player, right? Mm-hmm. And he's been looking better and better as his matches have progressed throughout the year.
I'm also a big fan of like the dynamism. Also, I love anyone that like their go-to is a suplex. I have a soft place in my heart for Cody Steele for that technique, because every opportunity he's like, if I get behind you a little bit, like
even sometimes that he doesn't have the opportunity, he's going for it.
But I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and
me
so
too.
Like but again, to face like 4 different trials winners, 3 or 4, I know of 3. I think there's a 4th one that I'm forgetting here in 2020 is just a display, and like to be contending in all those, and even face Dante Leon, who's an ADCC medalist, like at that level, it was really great to see Steele like look in the mix at that level, because I very much think that we'll see him in the running for ADCC 2022.
I think both these guys are gonna.
Yeah,
they're gonna be. Yeah, it's 2022 now, I guess, but I think both these guys are gonna be in the mix for sure.
Mm-hmm. 2 Grace Gundrum matches I want to talk about. Grace Gundrum versus Patty Fontes. Immediately after getting black belt, her first black belt match, takes on number 3 or 2 ranked Roosterweight Patty Fontes, beats her via submission, and then immediately a couple of weeks later goes on and has the match that I wanted to see, which is Grace Gundrum versus Maisa Bastos. Wasn't able to take that. That was a couple of weeks ago.
But looked good.
I don't know, got another great prospect, Grace, finally getting black belt at 18 through the 10th Planet system and being one of the top roosterweights in the world
right away.
Yep. And that's just a really cool thing to see. Like, we have a number of young women, Jessica Khan, Grace Gundrum, both getting black belt this year, that are just coming into the black belt and immediately being competitive in that scene. That's really cool. That's historically been one of the smaller divisions for the women. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that we have 2 new black belt prospects in that division. I cannot wait for her to face Khan and Nogi, and I cannot wait to see the rematch with Bastos in another year.
And this leads into something that we were talking about a little bit earlier. We also have the Cisneros matches, which we kind of talked about a little bit as matches of the year on this prospect list.
Because Japan's champion now,
sort of repeating, but
still 2 weeks into black belt.
2 weeks into black belt, it's unbelievable. And this kind of leads into something that we were talking about before we started doing the show today, is that so the way that I look at it, we jiu-jitsu became a sport that like a 40-year-old used car salesman will join in probably about 2010, right? Yeah. That's, it
prior to that,
people knew about it in the 90s. Throughout most of my early career, like I started around 2005. When I started in 2005, you didn't train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu unless you were like deep into martial arts already at some point and then like learned about this weird new martial art and did some Jiu-Jitsu and then got into it, or you were a fighter in some way, or you knew fighters in some way, or you wanted to be a fighter in some way, but then decided not to get punched in the head after a little bit and then just kept doing Jiu-Jitsu, right? And so like everything revolved around like this sort of obscure
early
angles.
2010s. That was the thing.
That was it,
You weren't for the most part, doing jiu-jitsu, unless you were like wanted to fight, martial arts, or you did fight.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't like a hobbyist BJJ as much. And definitely, everyone can point to someone here and there.
Of course. Everyone has a friend that was in that. But like on average, you didn't do jiu-jitsu unless you were in one of those camps. Most people were in one of those groups of people. I was fighting, right? And then I got,
that's right. I got into MMA,
head, right?
And then I was like, I don't get hit very well. What's this grappling thing on the ground?
Exactly.
I'm very good at that. That's way easier than getting punched a lot.
Getting punched sucks.
Let's do that.
So
and then here we are.
Then around 2010 is when I started noticing people that just wanted a new hobby starting to trickle in. Right, we started getting the guys that like needed something to do. They'd heard about it from a friend of a friend, and then decided to start doing jiu-jitsu and stuck with it. Right, it's guys and even more women at that point started doing it. The people that weren't even interested in competing. You know, like if you didn't compete before 2010, there was no chance you were getting a blue belt.
Yeah,
like I didn't know a single person that wasn't in tournaments every other month that had a blue belt prior to 2010. That
even like
didn't.
in the mid, like in 2013, 2014, I can't think of anyone that I knew that was a blue belt that wasn't like a competitor.
Yeah, that's fair too, right? I'm sure they existed, but then you started seeing people that just wanted to train. They wanted to get better at something. They wanted to have a nice hobby. They wanted to do things.
You got like straight hobbyists.
Yeah, and when that started happening, you also started seeing kids programs getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then when kids programs get bigger, less kids filter out of those programs, and you have those kids that started at 10, 11, 12.
And you have a lot of them.
And
that's the difference. Is like,
and you have some of them that are good athletes that chose to do jiu-jitsu over their high school sport high school sport, and they were 10 in 2010. They are now 20.
Stop banging the table.
Sorry.
2020.
I'm talking with my hands. They're now 20.
Dude, gestulate here.
Gestulate up. All right. They're now 20 years old, right?
Yeah, they're now black belts.
The 12-year-olds are 18. They're black belts. These are the people that we're seeing that are young and new and fresh and black belts. They've been doing it since they were kids. There's a reason, I said this earlier, there's a reason that 25-year-old dudes that start learning to wrestle don't make it to the Olympics. There's a reason that kids out of high school that start wrestling when they're 20 don't go to the Olympics. It's because they're competing against people that started when they were 8, 4, 9, 10, 3, 4, 2, right?
We're starting to see that turnover in jiu-jitsu, and we're starting to see prospects now. They're like, oh, you did jiu-jitsu as a kid, and you were part of, and not just like, we've had people that have done it for years that were like, you know, the champions of yesteryear, but now we're getting an abundance of them.
Yep.
Now we're getting a batch of people. Oh, you fought other kids at the time that had also, like, so now the overall level has reached like a saturation point where those kids are crazy, crazy good. And now they're adults. And now I'm in Masters, and I'm very happy to be in Masters. Bringing it back to me, very happy to be 29 and go into Masters divisions. I'm like, oh, awesome. 17-year-old murderer. Yeah, going to fight old guys that are a little stronger, but also a little slower and have a day job.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to see the sport grow and change. And now I talked about it earlier, we have more prospect black belts this year that we've covered before than any other year.
And I think that's just how it's going to be. I think this is it's more this year than any other year. I imagine that next year will be more than this year, and then the year after that will be more than next year, and it's just going to keep growing because that's the direction sports go, and that's what's happening right now. And it's nice to see. It's good to see. It means that the sport is getting to is getting to a point where this is a thing that we're seeing. It's exciting. But it's
just
the beginning.
It's a cool year. It was a cool year for prospects. I think next year I'm very excited to see who I don't know about this year at this moment right now. What is it? December 28th, 2020.
Yeah.
Who I don't know about at the end of the year 2021 when we do this show, I'll go, oh, this guy or this woman that I had no idea about that's now pan champion.
Yep.
It's like that's cool. You know, those stories excite me because I love being surprised, and jiu-jitsu is a very surprising sport, and anyone can get caught, and anyone can go on some crazy, outstanding run and be the next big star. So it's very, very exciting. So do you have any other things you want to talk about as far as matches or grapplers or whatnot before we move into the next segment of the show?
No, I think that's it.
All right. So you had one thing you wanted to do. You wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So you did
Personal
something
picks.
at the beginning of the show that we don't ever typically do in years past. And Zach was like, "Hey, I'm going to pick what my favorite match of the year is."
But like my favorite.
I'm not going to tell you. You're going to pick yours. And then at the end of the show, after we've gone through all of this, I want you to say you're not for any. I think it was the best. What was
it's
the
not
match
necessarily
that
the best.
you liked the most this year? And I put my head in my water bottle and I went, Zach, I don't want to do that. Makes me scared. He goes, no, it's not the best match. It's the match that you liked the most.
Yeah.
So, all right, Zach, I don't know what your match is. So now, what is your match?
Mikey Ollie.
That is. Why,
Yeah.
So why is that your
I love it
favorite
because
match?
so I love it for two reasons, because it does two things that are exact opposites at the same time. One, it shows how effective jiu-jitsu can actually be when you have these size discrepancies. You know, people have talked about it for years, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu is the way to beat a bigger guy, right? And I, as a bigger guy, have always said, well, that's fucking bullshit, right? But this showed that it can be, right?
As a smaller guy, I've gone, that's fucking bullshit.
Right? And I think we all know it's a little bit bullshit, right?
Yeah.
But this match is that, right? It's not a smaller guy winning. It's a smaller guy using jiu-jitsu unbelievably effectively against the top talent that you can possibly have at a high weight, right? And so it's this beautiful display of jiu-jitsu doing what people want it to do. It's jiu-jitsu being the smaller guy handling the bigger guy. It's also a demonstration that doesn't always work. Right?
The big guy goes, I'm gonna be the big guy here and not let this happen.
But it's also when the big guy is that skilled, at a certain point that breaks down. Right. And so this is two sides of the same coin here. We have this great display of jiu-jitsu being the small guy, right? Helio was a sickly little boy that never could walk, and he invented leverage.
He was an Olympic swimmer. Everyone kind of glosses over that. Like
no, you're wrong.
Him on the beach, jacked with Horian, and
he was in an iron lung. And he invented leverage to win.
Everyone forgets the pictures that we see of him when he was 90, not when he's in the 60s and 70s and ripped to the gills.
I love the flying double leg kick picture of Helio, but everyone, anyways.
It's he's so sickly. I'm he doesn't look that sickly, homie.
He was not sickly.
At all. You've been told wrong. He was a jacked athlete from the 50s.
Yeah, that's the story though. That's the story we want to tell, is that it was invented by this sickly man that had to use leverage to beat his much stronger older brothers, right? And as much as garbage as that story is, it's nice.
Yeah.
And here we see a smaller guy using jiu-jitsu effectively to fend off a bigger guy. And if this was on the street where jiu-jitsu doesn't work anyways, we would have a situation where that smaller guy is able to fend off a bigger guy long enough for someone, hopefully, to show up and break things up. Also, in the end, big and skill wins, which is what we expect in jiu-jitsu now, because it's a sport where bodies matter and big, strong guys have an advantage. And we see that come into play when people are nearly matched in skill. Big, strong guy often wins. And we know that that's the case, and we see it here as well. And I just like that this match does both of those things.
I also love it because we never, and I've also, you've made me appreciate this match even more. We all appreciate the balls on Mikey Musmechi here, because he was because he gets to show, he now is forever the guy I get to point to, which is look, that's the best guy, double in a row world champion, 2 different weight classes.
Yep.
Yeah, when he went up, he got beat. So you're gonna so when my buddy who's 135 pounds goes, I'm gonna do absolute, I'm like, you shouldn't do that. Why? Because Mikey Musmechi, who's far better than any of us will ever be in this land, couldn't do it. You're probably going to get smashed by that super heavyweight. It's going to eat a burger before the match, buddy. Mm-hmm. You should do it. I fully support you. I will coach you from the sidelines, and I will get you the ice after. But Mikey Musmechi already crossed this bridge for us. We don't need to cross it again.
So
as a small man that competes at light feather, thank you, Mikey Musmechi, for your sacrifice. So that's your match.
Now you don't need to test it.
I don't need to test it. I don't do open weight for a reason, because I'm a small man. If I'm 5'7", if I'm lying, I don't need to test it. So that's your match of the year.
That's my match. That's my favorite match of the year.
My personal favorite match of the year. It was Gordon versus Diniz. I'm a big context guy. I love that you have two. Again, I talked about it in the segment mostly, but you have a champion, ADCC open weight, and plus an under 99 kilogram champion, versus the under 88 kilogram champion versus champion. It gets thrown around a lot in a lot of other sports, but in jiu-jitsu, like those are the two highest honors. People work their entire life to not qualify at the trials. And these are the two champions of that sport. And if they've showed routinely that they can be and compete at that level, we get to throw them together and have this great match where they're both in their athletic prime. Yeah, the context of the match is a little weird, marred by being 2020 in general, and like Diniz maybe wasn't training as much, maybe he's a little smaller, but we get to see it happen.
Yeah.
And the true super fights where both guys are defending and active champions are so rare. The fact that we got to see it in 2020, was such a special moment to me of like, cool, we got to actually see ADCC champion versus ADCC champion. Yeah, it's not absolute and open, but it was still plus 88, plus 99. It's so rare. I love seeing that when they're one weight class apart, and it's such a meaningful thing for me as someone who loves like actual super fights. Like that is an actual super fight, champion versus champion. It's awesome. That's why the ADCC super fight is such a big deal, because it's cool. The previous open winner goes and fights the last open winner. Yeah, and it's like it's very meaningful. The same thing we have champion versus champion. So that is my personal match of the year, just because of how important that is and how rare that we don't see that very often. People will usually win the open weight and they'll go, cool, peace.
Yeah.
And then we'll see him every couple of years. But to have, Diniz step up and go, yeah, I'm going to fight the bigger guy in the thing he wants to do with all of the stakes as the champion, it's something special to me. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So that was my match of the year. You've really pushed me towards Jimenez versus Ollie, just because I want to point to that match when people ask, when's the open weight? Why? Because he's better than me and he can't do it. So
Mikey, you mean?
Mikey.
Yeah, Mikey. Yeah,
Mikey.
Yeah.
Why don't you? Ollie doesn't do open weight. So, all right. So, any other matches that you want to cover?
Nope.
All right. So, Zach,
we hit him.
End of the segment here. End of the show. Before we get into the preview section of the show, what is your highlight of the year and what is your low light of the year?
Well, I think low light's easy. It's just the year.
Yeah, I think that's for all of us. Like, the Grappling Grind low light of the year 2020 is just like what happened. It's like just the year being like not being able to train, jiu-jitsu, events being canceled, doing remote shows, all the editing I have to do, just like guys getting sick, people dying, just like
these extra 20 pounds.
Bro, I am in shape as I was, and I'm running, and I'm in great shape now.
I am not.
Also, my back's better this year, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's not better, but I'm in like way less pain, so I'll take that. But yeah, 2020, I'm not gonna cut you off, but
pretty low.
Low light of the year is the year.
Others have had lower. I'm fortunate. I feel happy that my low wasn't as low as some other people's overall, I think, but still, this year sucks.
Could have been better. Again, the sheer amount of events that we had canceled in 2020, the sheer amount of jiu-jitsu that we didn't get to do, the sheer amount of traveling and event coverage and interviews and just like cool stuff that we didn't get to do. And I'm very happy and thankful that we got to do the show from the basement for the year. Like the show was able to maintain, promoters were able to continue to run events, and like it was able to keep running enough. But all of the stuff that we could have done, we were setting up to do leading into 2020.
Out the window.
It's just super disappointing that we didn't get none of that get to come to fruition in the way that we wanted it to. So fuck that. That sucked. I'm disappointed.
My highlight of the year is, not surprisingly, before March.
In the before times.
In the before times, as I call them. Baltimore BJJ had this event. So there's a really wonderful nonprofit in Baltimore called Guardian, and it's a jiu-jitsu nonprofit. They essentially, to my understanding, provide jiu-jitsu to kids more or less for free, and then adults pay, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were doing some fundraisers
it's the typically folks in underserviced communities.
Yeah, it's not just
Baltimore has an abundance of those communities.
Yep. And so it's a good cause, and the Baltimore BJJ community put on a fundraiser for them, and we held it at our Baltimore BJJ mat space, and essentially just invited anyone in the Baltimore community to come make a donation and roll. And it was the highlight of my jiu-jitsu year, Because what ended up happening was we had black belts from all over the city, and I moved to this city, I guess a little over 2 years ago now, but I was in Philly for 6 years before that, and so all the people that I know, the black belts that I would hang out with and roll with, were in Philly, and so I didn't know a lot of people here. I haven't rolled with a lot of the black belts here, and it was one event where not everyone, but a lot of Baltimore,
a huge section of the community, and people that were active in the community,
and all over, from very different schools that often competed with each other at local events and things like that, and people kind of just threw that out the window, showed up, rolled around. I think I got rolls with 15, 16 different black belts on that day, and then countless brown belts, purple belts. I had more rolls that day than I had since, maybe I was 26. But it was good. It was, it was the kind of thing where you were just like, I need to stay an extra round because there's that guy over there that I've never seen before, and I want to get a roll in with him because it seems fun. And it wasn't like a high stress situation where, in competition, you're worried about actually winning. I think people didn't really care that much about winning. People were just kind of playing around and doing fun techniques and getting good matches in with someone that you didn't know.
Showed the community was like cool. And like, hey, like here's this local community, like all these fighters, all these gyms, all these like different organizations all coming together. Go, hey, there's a cool organization that supports jiu-jitsu in a community that potentially needs jiu-jitsu. Let's all come together and show like the community is a really cool and welcoming and open community, and that's awesome.
And everyone was super cool with each other while there.
Yeah.
It was great. And of course, when we were leaving, we were like, this was awesome. Let's do this again. We'll do it in 6 months.
And then
wrong.
Then the corona happened. But yeah, it's not going away. I think we can go back to that. You should have definitely gone second because mine is way shittier than yours. Like
that was your call. You asked me.
This like maze. I didn't think it was gonna be so good. I didn't think it was gonna be like a great like touching moment for the community. Mine's like, oh yeah, I feel good enough that I can compete again. Like, and I signed up to compete.
I mean, that's something. You had a broken back.
Yeah, it's not great. I'm back in PT again, but other reasons. But I feel healthy enough, and I'm in a minimal enough pain now. After like 2018,
I mean that's a highlight.
It is a highlight, but that's my highlight. My highlight of the year is like I feel well enough.
It's a little more selfish than my very community-driven.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to go. I wanted you to go second after I realized now. But it was cool, and I was in the middle of cutting weight in April to compete at 145, and then Corona happened. That didn't happen, so I didn't get to compete at all this year, which is like the only thing I wanted to do. But the fact that I couldn't, as soon as this all goes over, as soon as we've vaccinated, is safe to do so, and I'm comfortable doing so. I don't have a physical barrier to me going and competing anymore because I'm now healthy enough. That's huge for me. Given like we do this show in a huge way because I love competition jiu-jitsu. I love being part of it. I love covering it. I love watching it. I love that piece of the community and aspect. My ability to be able to go back into that and get smashed by guys that are far better than me on the world stage when they decide to go do a local comp is exciting for me. And I love the ability to kind of see how I match up against those. And so that's my highlight of the year, my ability to kind of be able to do that and walk back into that.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely my highlight of the year. Cool. Is like, cool, I can go fight and compete again.
That's a highlight.
Yeah. All right. So that any more kind of like amazingly, touching topic that you can say?
No, that's it.
I got to compete,
that's my one touching moment for the year.
So let's move on to our preview of Submission Underground 20. Zach, I need you to fill here for a second because I actually didn't pull the card up.
That's a tall order.
Yeah. Like, what do you, I don't know, what. Like,
I just gave my community-driven highlight. I don't have anything else.
Let me start. SUG 20 card. So this one is headlined by Mason Fowler taking on, I forget who he's taking on. Taking on Ryan Bader.
Okay.
For the championship belt. It takes place December 30th.
One last one in for the year.
Yep. Chael's going to get one more. And honestly, 2 weeks in a row. That's pretty.
Yeah.
They've done a couple of those this year with like really like boom cards. Most likely, I'm gonna pick Fowler in this one.
Fowler's been in this rule set. Fowler has been doing.
He's figured it. We talked about it. He has the formula. It's like look, like not disengage, but like if he feels like there's a he doesn't want to engage. He knows he is so strong on the arm.
Yeah.
He knows he is so strong in the back, and he knows how to get there in 5 minutes. He can play distance management. Or for Ishii, he engaged more, but I think he thought he had a technical advantage there. I think Bader, we're going to see something very similar. I think Bader's a really good pressure wrestler on the cage.
I was going to say, Bader's aggressive, though, so he might not be able to play that game as easily as otherwise, but I still think he's got that rule set down. He knows what he's doing there. So
next one, we have Satoshi Ishii versus Craig Jones. Love seeing Craig Jones. We just saw Ishii versus Mason Fowler a couple of weeks ago. Yep. Fowler was able to get that via armbar in regulation. I foresee Jones getting underneath Ishii and...
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see, though. I look forward to seeing how Jones approaches it. I think that Jones wins here, but I think it'll be interesting to see how he approaches it because Ishii is such a brick, and he is very difficult to move.
He's like a human brick. He's like a human judoka brick.
Yeah, and Craig Jones... Craig Jones' strategy is often getting underneath people with sort of off-balancing mobility from the bottom, and...
this one takes place Wednesday, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they were trying to get it in.
I'm on vacation, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
I may be out of town on Wednesday for reasons. But other matches we have are CB Dalloway versus Richie Martinez. Very kind of curious to see how that went. I haven't seen Dalloway compete in grappling in a bit here.
Yeah.
I kind of don't know what to make of that one. I could see Richie pulling out an overtime win here. Richie tends to kind of favor that style of grappling. We also have Pearl Gonzalez versus Jillian Robertson. I think Jillian Roberts has the most submission wins of any female in the UFC in her division, I think, at strawweight.
Interesting.
We have Hunter Colvin versus Gabriel Gonzaga. Haven't seen Gonzaga in a bit here. He was on Slug a bunch prior. He's won a fight to win before. He's Gabriel Gonzaga. Yeah. We've seen Colvin a lot. This is a really funny match because I know Gonzaga is going to be probably pushing 240, 260, and Colvin is, I think, 85 or a light heavyweight.
Oh,
but
that's kind of what I thought. Maybe I was confused on Colvin's weight. But
Colvin just fought Rotolo.
Yeah, okay.
That's Matt Colvin.
Oh.
So that's a big size discrepancy.
It's a big size difference.
And we haven't seen a ton from Gonzaga, but Colvin's been super active. So, I don't know how that one's going to go.
Gabriel Gonzaga's still Gabriel Gonzaga.
And that's sort of my thought, but Colvin is just younger, active. I think he's probably going to try to push a really heavy pace on Gonzaga, and Gonzaga's going to try to slow him down. Yeah. I could see it going to overtime, and just Colvin with so much experience there, it wouldn't surprise me to see him but Gonzaga's got so much MMA experience defending the back. But he's usually not the guy with people on his back. So kind of an interesting matchup for that reason.
Yeah.
Some interesting matches on the undercard as well. We're going to talk about it all next week on the show. Zach, any sort of closing thoughts for the 2020 recap weirdness of the year?
Looking forward to 2020 being over.
Me too. So any plans for the week?
Working.
I'm on vacation. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
My brother's in town, so hanging out with him, playing tons of video games, and just generally, having a great time.
I'm actually enjoying work because there's a lot of other people that aren't there, and so it's the kind of thing where I can just show up.
I never take this week off, but Rachel has the week off. My brother's in town. I'm like, all right, well, I have too much vacation. I got to use a bunch of it before it goes bad, which is weird. So I was like, I'll take a week off. Basically, I'm like, you got to use your loose. I'm like, I guess I'll take a week off. Oh no,
I'll use it.
So that's this year, first time ever I'm taking a Christmas week off. So I'm pretty amped to just hang out.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's it. Anything else?
Nope, that's all I got.
All right. As always in the show, I'm your host, Maine, and the co-host,
Zach.
And we are the Grappling Rewind. We will see you on the mats, whenever that is.
2021.
If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
let us know.
Reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.